This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, so in today's segment, we'll look at the next points after the principles to follow. We will look at the pitfalls in requirements elicitation. So, first of all, what is this all about? What are the pitfalls and why should we be bothered about it? The point is that similar to any other job out there in the market, every job will have its own set of, pros and cons. There are pluses and minuses in that job. So in the business analyst job also, there are certain things which you need to be a little wary about so that you can run your job much more smoothly. So we'll try to capture all of those things in this and the next slide in the couple of videos. Okay, so the point over here is to be aware of what are the general things that perhaps can go wrong and be aware of it and be prepared for it. Okay, so that you can avoid those sort of things happening at work. The first point over here is lack of clarity in objectives. There is nothing but you are in a particular project and the specific pain points or the specific business requirements are not clearly sorted out. It could be due to any reason. It could be because the stakeholders have not been very clear, they have been very vague in what they want, or it could be that the requirements documentation did not happen in such a way that it could bring out the clarity, or it could be any reason. But one thing you need to clearly note is that if the objective of the project is not clear, then that will have a huge impact on what you're going to deliver at the end of the timeline. So make sure, if required, maybe spend a couple of workshops initially to make it specific about what would be the business objective, how you would be addressing the specific pain points, and the solution that you're going to really utilize for making sure that these business requirements are met. Okay, so that comes under your lack of clarity in objectives. The second thing is insufficient stakeholder involvement. This is something which happens usually because the stakeholders have their own, day-to-day work, being part of some senior designations in their company, they will have a lot of things on their plate on a daily basis. And attending these workshops, clarifying the business requirements, and going through the document and providing their approvals and being part of the demo sessions, these all are like over and above their regular work. So there is a possibility that the stakeholders may not be involved to the extent that is required. What happens due to this is the key requirements, the key details, which should be part of your analysis and all, can be missed out. Now, in your client's, organization, there'll be a lot number of people. Out of all of those people, why a specific four or five or seven or eight people have been picked up, and this stakeholder group has been formed? Because these people play a key role in the success of the project, right? And out of those people who have already been identified as the key people, if one or two are not really involved in the requirements process, then that can have a detrimental effect. So that needs to be avoided. Okay, how do you do that? Is when do not raise a concern after the entire requirements gathering sessions and all have got over. That may not help. So initially itself, when a couple of sessions have happened, a couple of workshops have taken place, and you find that a specific stakeholder is not available, you know, raise this concern with your project manager, and there'll be a specific person assigned as project sponsor from the client side. Let that person be aware of this point. It's not like you're escalating something, but rather you're raising a concern. So the way it can work out is, instead of that specific stakeholder, maybe someone else from that division can be part of your workshops. Or if there is some existing documentation which can provide you the required details which were missing, the sort of inputs which are missing, you can access those. Or maybe, if that person is not available during the workshop timing, maybe you'll plan to have a one-to-one interview sessions planned with that specific stakeholder. Or if that also doesn't work, maybe you will drop in a mail with the specific points that you're looking for from them and get that input from them. Maybe, next day or the day after, something like this. So things can be worked out, but it requires you to be proactive and take that step of ensuring that you have enough stakeholder involvement. Okay. The third thing is not asking the right questions. This is something which is more from the BA that should happen, because whenever any specific requirement details are being shared by the stakeholders, we can't really expect them to, automatically deliver all the details to you uh, with a single question from your end. That doesn't happen, right? You have to probe in a little. You have to, put your thought process into it. Maybe if not the same day, you do the analysis at the end of the workshop, and next day you come back with the right set of questions to which they can provide the responses. So it has to be sorted out. You need to make sure that all the requirements related details are captured in depth. What happens if you don't do? It's nothing but when you take these requirement details to the development team, when they start developing, they will ask you those questions. A typical example could be about the login scenario. Okay, login page. Now every other website or mobile app will have the login section. So now if you leave it at saying that okay, there should be a login screen, and do not capture more details about it. Later, what happens is development team will ask, okay, when you say login, okay, we understand only username and password is the option that you're looking for, not login through other options like login through Google or login through Facebook and all. That's understood. But what should be the maximum character length of the username that a customer can select? Or what is the password? Do you want to put any conditions on how the password should be chosen by the customer, like special characters, numbers, caps, small letters, and all those things? Or do you want to provide a option of forgot password to the customer? Or do you want to provide any other alternate login option if not login through any social media platforms? So these are the questions which ideally you should be asking the stakeholders, getting those details sorted out and documented so that the development team is also clear with it. If you don't, then definitely it will come at a later point of time and it's a time consuming process. Development team asks you, you ask the stakeholders, you document it, get an approval, then share it to the development team. It it delays the process of development. All of these things will happen. So how do you make sure is to uh, look into each and every requirement that you've captured and analyze it properly so that you will be able to pull out the right questions from it and get the responses. Okay. The next point is assuming knowledge. So here what is happening is when you talk about a particular project development, there are a lot of things involved in it. Like there is a release process, or there is a pilot testing that has to happen. There is a user acceptance testing that has to happen. There are sprints that are followed in the Scrum Agile projects, and there is a possibility of releasing patches once the full length releases have taken place. And there's a SDLC process, like any requirement first has to go through requirement gathering, then design, then development, testing, implementation, rollout, pilot testing, launch, like this. So now, being part of the IT project by discussing with the project manager and the tech team, and by discussing with fellow business analysts, you are aware of all of these points. But that doesn't mean that the stakeholders should also be aware of these process. So whenever there is a requirement discussion that is happening, the change requirement that comes into picture, whenever any changes are supposed to be done, any enhancements to the existing features, so all of these things may not be known to stakeholders. So whenever any such thing is required to be discussed, discuss it and make sure that the stakeholders are aware of the process. Like for example, if today a requirement has been given, if all of a sudden they come up with a change in that requirement, you should make them aware that there's a change management process wherein they have to give that change, you have to consider it, you have to analyze it, maybe you have to take it to the tech lead, look into the efforts required, and then see if it is supposed to be prioritized right now, or can we do away with it for now and take it up at the later release, then consider it across. So if you tell this process, they'll be aware and they'll be more careful when they're giving the next set of requirements because they'll be thinking that, okay, if at all, if you have to ask for a change, then there is a big process involved. So this thing needs to be brought out. Don't assume that the stakeholders are aware of the way the projects are managed. The next point is scope creep. This we have touched upon in one of our initial videos, if you remember, wherein we were talking about the tasks that a BA should be involved in. So scope creep can derail the entire project. If at all, if a particular requirement or a feature or functionality has not been, discussed at the required length, then later when it goes for development, then a lot of things come up, and it can increase the timelines and efforts required to implement that particular feature, and all of those things can happen. So scope creep should be avoided. And how can you do it is, one thing is, clearly call out the assumptions and dependencies. In fact, in your business requirement document or the functional specification document and all, you mention that, okay, that these are the this is what is not considered in scope of the project. When you call it out in that way and get a due approval on that document, then later you can use that as a valid point saying that this is not supposed to be considered right now. That is one way in which you can avoid scope creep. The second thing is being very detailed in the documentation of the requirements, so that any requirement, if they mention that this is not enough, you need to implement more, you can say that this was considered only to certain extent, this extent which has been mentioned in the document. So that way you need to find ways in which you can avoid scope creep in your project. The next thing is having bias or preconceptions. So this generally happens when, as a BA, you would have worked in a couple of projects related to the same domain earlier. So what happens is, when you get into a project of a particular domain, which you're already aware of because of your prior projects, you start assuming things from your end that, okay, in my previous project of this domain, this is what we did. So that will, work the same way over here in this project also, or that were the policies that were implemented. The same things will be required over here in this project also. So that sort of preconceptions can be there in your mind, which need not be correct all the time. For example, you are working in the healthcare domain, okay, and earlier you worked for a US healthcare related project, and now you're working for a Australian healthcare project. Now, obviously, whatever Medicare, Medicaid, and all was related to US healthcare need not be the same way for your Australian healthcare system. So this particular client's, the regulatory framework that they have to follow could be totally different. Now, because of your preconception that, okay, there, we had to work with this limitation when it came to business requirements, so we need to apply the same over here. That sort of things should be avoided. If you are not aware of something, call it out. Discuss it with the stakeholders, or search it on the net, or do some research from your side and get the things clarified instead of going with a bias or a preconception that, okay, this is how it works. The next point is about the inadequate documentation. What do we mean by this is nothing but, you have understood the requirements through the workshops, and then you have documented it. But the document that you have created is not calling out all the details in the required manner, which is creating a sort of, vagueness or ambiguity for the developers and the testers when they look into coding and testing the features. So this will again lead to you going back to stakeholders, getting the thing sorted out, or they coming back to you and you needing to, revise the document. All these things can happen, which will again, delay the project timelines. And okay, having said these things, let me stop with the points here and give a disclaimer over here. Uh, when you talk about all of these pitfalls and requirements elicitation, they could be thought in the minds of those who are getting into the business analysis field, that, oh my god, these are so many things that I need to really be worried about, or to be concerned about. So one thing you need to take care of is that when you work on a particular project, when you are looking at the requirements, it's not your sole responsibility Rather, it is also equally the responsibility of the stakeholders to ensure that the requirements are properly getting captured. Because down the line, if you look at it, once the project is fully delivered and you move to a different project, the stakeholders have to still live with that project, right? They have to be, justifying as to how it is getting used by the customers, why a certain feature was not considered during the development phase, and why it was not, discussed with the team when they were implementing it. So they are also going to be responsible for those points. So it's a shared responsibility, right? So for the stakeholders, it is their company's product. It's their feature or service which they are giving to their customers. So they are more concerned about it. As a BA, you're facilitating the process. So you can always rely on them for details, and they also have to take care that everything is happening in the right way. But you cannot completely be dependent on them. You need to do your set of analysis. You need to find out the ways where things can go wrong and try to fix it initially itself with the support of the stakeholders and with the support of the project manager. So keep that in mind. It's not like 100% you are going to be accountable, but it's always a good thing to be aware and be prepared for what is supposed to be managed. Okay, so we'll do one thing. We will stop here, and there are quite a few more points that we need to look into. We will take it up in the next video. Okay, thanks everyone.